At the prestigious Robertson Conservatory, teachers routinely dismissed Lillian Porter, the quiet new assistant. But when a crisis erupted during an important recital, they pressured her into attempting an impossible piano piece. What they didn't realize was that the woman they had been belittling was, in fact, one of the world's most celebrated pianists. The conservatory's halls buzzed with sound, students running scales, professors giving sharp critiques, and the occasional sigh of frustration. In the middle of it all, Lillian moved silently, stacking sheet music and dusting piano keys with practiced ease. At 38, she blended in deliberately. Her chestnut hair was pulled into a simple braid, her blue dress unremarkable, her every movement efficient and quiet. 6 weeks into her role as administrative assistant, most of the faculty hardly noticed her, exactly as she preferred. Ms. Porter, these need to be sorted by composer, not chronologically. Dr. Constance? Whitmore's voice cut through the air, sharp and precise. The head of piano studies barely looked up from her leather planner. Of course, Dr. Whitmore, I'll fix it right away, Lillian replied softly, taking the stack from her manicured hands. With a curt nod, the professor strode away, heels, striking the marble floor in a crisp rhythm. Lillian watched her leave, a faint smile touching her lips. As she began reorganizing the pages, her gaze lingered on a particularly challenging list transcription. Her fingers twitched ever so slightly. Muscle, memory stirring at the familiar notes. It had been 5 years since she'd last performed. 5 long years. Daydreaming on the job, Miss Porter? Professor Walter Thornton's voice startled her. The elderly composition teacher peered at her through wire-rimmed glasses, his bow tie slightly askew as always. Just sorting these, Professor, she said quickly, finishing the stack. He studied her for a moment. Curious. For someone without formal training, you seem to handle these scores as though you understand them. Eyes down, Lillian answered softly. I've picked up a little in my 6 weeks here. His tone carried more doubt than praise. Music isn't about shuffling papers. It takes years of talent, discipline, and proper heritage. Lillian only nodded. I wouldn't dare presume otherwise. Satisfied, he shuffled off, muttering about lost standards. Later, she entered the office of Madame Elisabeth Dubois, the conservatory's famed French performance coach. Entrez, came the commanding reply. Behind the desk, Madame Dubois sat, poised, her silver hair in a perfect chignon, her posture ballet straight. Ms. Porter. At last. These program notes are a disaster. Retype them for tomorrow's scholarship competition. Our donors expect nothing less than perfection. Of course, Madame, Lillian replied, accepting the heavily marked pages, red ink bleeding across them. And please, no mistakes this time. I won't have another embarrassment like last week. Lillian held her tongue. The embarrassment had been one misplaced accent on a French name, a mistake Madame herself had written. But she only said, I'll be meticulous. As she turned to leave, her eyes caught the open score on the piano. Liszt's transcription of Beethoven's Fifth, the same piece she'd lingered on earlier. Is this what Gregory Palmer will perform tomorrow? She asked before she could stop herself. Yes, Madame Dubois said sharply. Why? It's a daring choice for a student. Mr. Palmer is our finest. He thrives on challenge, though I hardly think you are in any position to judge. Liszt, she added coldly. You're right. My apologies, Lillian murmured. The next morning, the scholarship competition dawned with a charged, nervous energy pulsing through the conservatory. The grand foyer of the Robertson Conservatory glimmered with wealth and prestige. Donors in tailored suits and strings of pearls mingled with professors, while nervous students secluded themselves in practice rooms, making last-minute preparations. Lillian arrived early, her nicest navy dress pressed neatly, her braid more carefully done than usual. Today's event would decide which young musicians would earn the coveted Robertson Scholarship, a full ride that could launch a career. Miss Porter, thank heavens, Professor Thornton called, beckoning her over to where a cluster of board members stood. The programs, if you please. She handed him the neatly printed stack, still warm from the press room. Excellent, he muttered, distributing them to the waiting donors without so much as a glance. Now, backstage. The students are in their usual state of panic. Backstage was exactly that. Chaos. Some students paced, others practiced fingerings in the air while a few sat rigid, eyes closed, whispering silent rehearsals. Off to the side, Gregory Palmer, the conservatory's star pupil, looked pale. His hands trembled. "Mr. Palmer?" Lillian approached gently. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," he mumbled, though his quivering fingers betrayed him. "You're playing Liszt, aren't you? I heard you yesterday. It was beautiful." Gregory blinked, startled. "You were listening?" "It's hard not to when it's played with such feeling," she said softly. His shoulders slumped. "But the technical passages, I don't know if I can do it. Not today. Not with everyone watching." A pang of recognition tugged at her, the memory of her own stage fright years ago, when the weight of expectation had felt like a physical burden. "May I?" She gestured to his score. He handed it over, curious. Most assistants couldn't even read basic notation. Lillian flipped to the section she'd heard him stumble through. "You're attacking this passage too forcefully. Liszt demands power, yes, but it's controlled power. Think of it as waves, not lightning." Gregory stared. "How do you know that?" She quickly handed the score back. "Something I once heard Madame Dubois tell another student." Before he could press further, Dr. Whitmore swept in, clipboard in hand. "Places, everyone. Mr. Palmer, you'll open the program." She turned to Lillian with a dismissive flick of her hand. "Ms. Porter, keep the green room quiet." As Lillian retreated, she caught Gregory whispering under his breath. "Waves, not lightning. Waves." From the green room she listened, as the competition began. Dr. Whitmore's voice carried smoothly through the speaker system, welcoming the distinguished guests and explaining the importance of the day. The recital hall's perfect acoustics carried every note backstage. Gregory performed first. His playing was solid, not dazzling, but he navigated the tricky section more smoothly than in practice. The applause was polite, appreciative, but not overwhelming. One by one, the other students performed, some with brilliance, others buckling under nerves. During intermission, Madame Dubois appeared, looking harried. "Miss Porter, take these refreshments to the judges' table, and be discreet." Balancing a tray of water glasses, Lillian approached the panel just as Dr. Whitmore leaned toward Professor Thornton, speaking in a hushed but cutting tone. Palmer completely misinterpreted the list, too restrained in the allegro, too timid in the crescendos. "I've told Elizabeth her methods are outdated," Thornton replied, sipping coffee. "These modern students need strict guidance, not French romanticizing about feeling the music." Lillian placed the glasses quietly on the table, too quietly. Thornton noticed. "Well, well, our little eavesdropper," he said loudly enough for Whitmore to look up. "Tell us, Miss Porter, what did you think of Mr. Palmer's performance?" It was meant to embarrass her, to remind her of her place, but something stirred in her. The music still vibrating in her chest, memories of her own teachers echoing in her mind. Her words came before she could stop them. "His technique was excellent, but he hasn't yet found the heart of the piece. Liszt's transcriptions aren't mere exercises, they're reimaginings. They should hold the soul of both composers." The silence was instant and heavy. Whitmore's "yar" teacup froze halfway to her lips. "I beg your pardon?" Thornton sputtered. Lillian's cheeks flushed. "Forgive me. I shouldn't have spoken. It isn't my place." "No," Whitmore snapped, her voice icy. "It most certainly is not. Kindly return to your duties, Miss Porter, and leave the assessments to those who are qualified." Head bowed, Lillian withdrew. But she didn't see the exchange of puzzled glances between the professors, the first flicker of suspicion dawning. As the intermission ended and the audience returned, the recital hall brimmed with anticipation. Crystal chandeliers glowed overhead, polished wood shimmered under stage lights, and the air itself seemed to hum with tension. Backstage, however, panic struck. What do you mean he can't perform? Dr. Whitmore's voice, though hushed, was sharp enough to slice through steel. Donors in tailored suits and glittering pearls mingled with faculty in the grand foyer, while students shut themselves away in practice rooms for frantic last-minute preparations. Lillian arrived early, dressed in her neat navy dress, her hair braided with more care than usual. Today was no ordinary day. The Robertson Scholarship auditions were underway, a competition that could launch musical careers with its full-ride prize. "Miss Porter, thank heaven you're here," Professor Thornton called, waving her over to a cluster of board members. "The programs, please." She handed him the freshly printed stack, still warm from the press room. He barely glanced at them before passing, copies to the waiting donors. "Now assist backstage. The students are in their usual state of panic." Backstage was chaos. Performers paced, fingers twitching silently through scales, or sat with eyes shut, visualizing their moment on stage. Gregory Palmer, the conservatory's golden boy, stood apart, pale and trembling. "Mr. Palmer, are you all right?" Lillian asked softly. He looked up, his voice faint. "Fine." But the word rang hollow. "You're playing the Liszt, aren't you? I heard you yesterday. It was beautiful." Gregory blinked, finally meeting her eyes. You listened?" "It's hard not to when it's played with such feeling," she said warmly. Then she gestured at his score. "May I?" Hesitant, he handed it over. Most staff couldn't read music, at least not like this. Lillian flipped to a passage. "You're attacking this too hard. Liszt is power, yes, but it's controlled power. Think waves, not lightning." Gregory stared. "How do you know?" She quickly returned the score. "Something I heard Madame Dubois tell a student once." Before he could press further, Dr. Whitmore swept in, clipboard in hand. "Places, everyone. Mr. Palmer, you're first. Miss Porter, keep the green room quiet." From backstage, Lillian listened. Gregory played well, solid technique, even grace, but lacked spark. She heard her advice echoed faintly in his smoother phrasing. The applause was polite, not thunderous. Performer after performer followed, some brilliant, others faltering under nerves. During intermission, Madame Dubois handed Lillian a tray of water glasses. "Take these to the judges. Be discreet." At the table, she overheard hushed voices. Palmer misunderstood entirely. Dr. Whitmore sighed. Too restrained in the allegro, too timid in the crescendos. Thornton shook his head. "Elizabeth's methods are outdated. These students need discipline, not French lectures on feeling the music." Setting the tray down, Lillian froze when Thornton caught her eye. "Ah, our little eavesdropper. Tell us, Miss Porter, what did you think of Palmer's performance?" It was meant to humiliate. But something in her, the echo of the music, the ache of memory, made her speak honestly. "His technique was excellent," she said quietly, "but he hasn't found the piece's soul. Liszt transcriptions aren't drills. They're reinterpretations carrying two composers' voices at once." Silence. Dr. Whitmore's teacup halted midair. "I beg your pardon?" Thornton sputtered. Flushed, Lillian lowered her eyes. "I shouldn't have spoken. Forgive me." "No," Dr. Whitmore snapped. "It is not your place. Return to your duties." She retreated, missing the puzzled glances the professors exchanged, suspicion now blooming where dismissal had once been. The recital hall swelled with anticipation for the final program. Donors, faculty, families, and students filled the elegant space, chandeliers casting golden light across polished wood. But backstage, disaster loomed. Gregory sat hunched, gasping. His hand trembled violently. I can't feel my fingers." Madame Dubois knelt beside him, alarmed. "A panic attack, even the best suffer them." "This is unacceptable," Dr. Whitmore hissed. "The Danson Foundation came for Liszt. Without it, The funding is gone. Thornton's bow tie was askew as he paced. No other student is prepared. The transcription is far too difficult. Die. Professors argued, voices low and frantic. Lillian's gaze drifted to the sheet music resting on the piano. Liszt's transcription of Beethoven's Fifth, a piece she had not dared touch in 5 years. 5 years of silence, of healing. She stepped forward, kneeling beside Gregory. The applause that greeted Lillian as she stepped onto the stage was courteous, almost perfunctory. In the front row, Dr. Whitmore sat stiffly beside Professor Thornton, both wearing strained smiles that never reached their eyes. Madame Dubois, however, leaned forward, her gaze sharp with curiosity. The grand piano shimmered beneath the lights, its lid raised high. Lillian approached with quiet reverence, adjusting the bench with flawless precision. Such a simple, ordinary motion, yet executed with a pianist's practiced confidence. And it was enough to shift the audience's attention. Seated, she paused, centering herself. 5 years of painstaking therapy, of mending her injured hands had brought her here. She hadn't expected this night to be her return. Yet here she was. Her hands touched the keys. From the first commanding chords of Beethoven's immortal theme, reshaped by Liszt's daring transcription, the recital, Hall knew something remarkable was unfolding. Her fingers flew with effortless accuracy, conjuring sounds that seemed to exceed human reach. The four-note motif thundered through the space with the force of an orchestra, yet softened into the intimacy only a solo piano could give. The crowd began to change. What began as polite attention dissolved into shock, then hushed awe. Whitmore's forced smile slipped, leaving her stunned. Thornton leaned forward unconsciously, his glasses sliding down his nose. As Lillian moved into the development, her mastery revealed not just flawless execution, but a deep, emotional resonance. This was no mere recital of notes. It was music reborn, alive with both Beethoven's fire and Liszt's brilliance. Madame Dubois reacted first. A faint gasp escaped her lips as realization struck. She clutched Thornton's sleeve, whispering, urgently, "C'est Lillian Kurtz." The name spread like a ripple. Lillian Kurtz, the prodigy who had electrified Europe 15 years earlier. The pianist whose career was cut short by tragedy. The artist who vanished after a failed return in Vienna 5 years ago. At the piano, Lillian felt something long buried stir awake. Her hands, once frail, now strong, flowed across the keys with commanding ease. The passages that had rattled Gregory earlier seemed to pour out of her naturally, as if the piano itself yielded to her touch. Gregory had played with technique, but hesitation. Lillian played with the weight of triumphs and heartbreaks lived. Whitmore had gone pale. Thornton removed and replaced his glasses again and again, as if doubting his own eyes. Dubois alone seemed moved beyond shock, tears shining in her eyes. Reaching the final movement, Lillian finally looked up, meeting the audience she had avoided until now. What she saw was not mere admiration but transformation. Donors, professors, and students alike bound together by the rare experience of true artistry. With a perfect balance of force and delicacy, she carried the work to its conclusion. The last chords rang out, commanding, absolute. Then silence. For 3 suspended beats the hall held its breath, and then eruption. The ovation rose at once, deafening and unanimous. Polite patrons leapt to their feet, clapping with raw fervor. Some dabbed away tears, others shouted, "Brava!" In the back, a dignified old patron wept openly. Lillian stayed seated for a moment, eyes closed, letting the applause wash over her. Not music this time, but true acceptance. At last she rose and bowed humbly. The ovation only grew. Whitmore sat frozen, ashen-faced. Thornton abandoned all pretense of composure, staring in disbelief. Dubois, however, stood with the others, her applause ringing loud, her eyes wet with pride. As Lillian bowed again, she glimpsed Gregory in the wings, his earlier panic forgotten, awe shining on his face. She offered him a gentle smile before turning back to the hall. At last, Whitmore stood, her movements stiff and mechanical. She took the microphone, her voice trembling despite her effort to steady it. "Ladies and gentlemen, please. It seems we owe you an explanation." She turned toward Lillian, struggling to compose herself. "Would you care to introduce yourself properly, Miss Porter? Or should I say, Miss Kurtz?" A hush fell over the hall. Lillian stepped forward into the warmth of the stage lights. For years she had hidden, burying her past. Now, the revelation stirred another wave of astonishment through the hall. A distinguished gentleman in a tailored suit leaned toward his companion, whispering just loud enough. "Kurtz, the finest interpreter of Liszt in her generation." Dr. Whitmore's smile grew taut. "Perhaps you could tell our audience why one of the world's most celebrated pianists has been serving as an administrative assistant at our conservatory these past 6 weeks." Her words were designed to humiliate, yet Lillian stood tall, answering with calm assurance. "5 years ago I endured an injury that doctors believed ended my career," she said steadily. "After several surgeries and years of therapy, I wasn't certain if I could or even should return to performing. I needed to rediscover my bond with music away from the glare of the stage." Her eyes swept the faculty, many of whom shifted, uncomfortably. "The Robertson Conservatory's reputation for excellence drew me here. I came to immerse myself again in music, to observe, to learn before deciding my path forward." Madame Dubois now joined her on stage, composure regained. "Why didn't you reveal who you were?" she asked softly, though her expression suggested she already knew the answer. "Would you have treated me the same if you had?" Lillian's gentle response hung in the air. Silence spoke volumes. Whitmore flushed. Thornton fussed with his bow tie. Then from the audience, a silver-haired patron rose. "Ms. Kurtz, I'm Robert Danson. My foundation came today hoping to support new talent, but instead, we've witnessed a triumphant return. Would you consider giving a masterclass to our scholarship students?" Before Lillian could reply, Dr. Whitmore leapt forward, her voice suddenly brimming with warmth. "The Robertson Conservatory would be honored to host Ms. Kurtz for a full series of masterclasses. In fact, we've even been discussing an artist-in-residence position." Lillian arched an eyebrow, but let the fabrication pass. Danson smiled. Broadly. "Excellent. In that case, I believe we can expand our funding commitment. True talent deserves nurturing. Don't you agree, Dr. Whitmore?" As they began trading pleasantries, Professor Thornton approached awkwardly, fiddling with his glasses. "Miss Kurtz, I owe you an apology for failing to recognize your brilliance." "You never looked for it, Professor," Lillian replied evenly. "We only see what we expect." He nodded sheepishly, adding, "I hope you'll consider remaining here, in a position more fitting to your abilities." Suddenly, the professors clustered around, eager to claim ties to her name. Lillian quietly slipped away to where Gregory Palmer stood hesitantly in the wings. That was... "I've never heard anything like it," he whispered, eyes wide with awe. "You will," she assured him gently. "With time, and the right guidance." "Will you teach me?" he asked, hope shining in his face. "I'd be honored," she answered with a sincere smile. "But promise me one thing, play for yourself, not for them." She gestured toward the bustling crowd of faculty and donors. In that moment, looking at Gregory's earnest expression, Lillian knew her future. Not the lonely road of a touring virtuoso, but a life of teaching, guiding, and sharing the wisdom her journey had given her. 1 month later, Lillian Kurtz sat in her new office at the Robertson Conservatory. The plaque on the door read, "Artist in Residence," a role created especially for her after her stunning return. Whitmore and Thornton were now unfailingly deferential, seeking her approval at every turn.